Our State of the U.S. segment tonight, two top officials are out at a New Hampshire VA hospital after whistleblowers reported an operating room infested with flies and the use of unsterile surgical equipment. To make matters worse, it took 6 months from the time of the initial reports before the problems were even addressed. Is this the government-run healthcare liberals want everyone to receive? With me now, retired Air Force Colonel and Chairman of Gator Pack, Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Liz. Good to be back.
Colonel, these photographs, we showed them on the screen just a moment ago, they're chilling. This operating room, there are flies. There was a fly zapper in the operating room. The instruments have either rust or blood on them. I don't know which would even be worse. I mean, it's shameful. It's shameful that this is the type of care that we would provide to the men and women who serve and sacrifice for our nation.
It's absolutely shameful, and it's to most people, I think it's unbelievable, to the average citizen, but to veterans that have been through the VA system, I have to say, sadly, that I'm not surprised, even with all of the supposed gains and the $16 billion infusion into the VA system a year and a half ago, none of that, as we said all along, was going to make one darn bit of difference to keeping veterans alive and making sure they get the best quality health care America can provide.
No, I mean, obviously not. I mean, the accountability is the crux of the matter here. Not only the shoddy care, but there's no one noticed this. How did it take 6 months? The original allegations, by the way, were put forth by 11 doctors and other medical employees in January of 2017, 6 months ago. It was only this week that the Secretary of the Veterans Affairs actually removed the hospital director and the chief of staff of this hospital. 6 months. It's unbelievable.
That's unbelievable, and the fact that it took 11 medical personnel, many of them doctors, chief spinal surgeons, and chiefs of medicine to get the VA to move on this. And as I've said all along, government bureaucrats should not be in charge of delivering health care to America's veterans or anybody else for that matter. The Senate needs to vote to repeal Obamacare today and get that bill to the president's desk.
Right. It's absolutely shocking. And you mentioned the head of the spinal cord clinic. So this is not just a hypothetical story where we look and see flies, where we look and see the potential for damage against our veterans. This doctor, his name is Dr. William Coys, the head of the spinal cord clinic, he actually has a list. He made a list of 80 patients over the last 5 years who were suffering from nerve damage, potentially crippling nerve damage in the neck. They had to use wheelchairs. They had to use walkers. They had to use canes. This doctor said that this is a very diagnosable, a very treatable issue, and if these veterans had gotten the surgery they needed, they wouldn't have to use any of this. But they were denied that.
They were not only denied it, but it took them 6 months, as you pointed out, to believe 11 medical personnel. Now, these aren't janitors or people that check folks in that are helping folks administratively. They're medical personnel. It's just absolutely unconscionable that these government bureaucrats and the Veterans Administration can continue to get away with this. And I might add that Secretary Shulkin, I appreciate that he removed the two individuals, but they have not been terminated. And
Right.
when somebody does something as egregious as this and they're in charge of it, it should be a very simple and easy process to terminate those individuals and make a determination on what level of retirement pay, if any, that they should get. There's a process with military officers and enlisted personnel that does the same exact thing. You can have your military retirement decreased or even eliminated if something is found after the fact, after you've been removed or even after you've retired.
Right, and in my book, if you are in charge of a hospital for veterans, the men and women who fight for our nation, your operating rooms are unsterile, your instruments are rusty, and you have documented evidence that you've neglected care for 80 of these men and women, the process should be very simple. It should be 2 words. You are fired. 3 words. You are fired. It should not be some bureaucratic red tape that you have to go through, some process that takes 6 months. I mean, this clinic, by the way, this is the only VA hospital in the entire state of New Hampshire. Veterans don't have options here. This is where they go if they want care in that state. The Department of Veterans Affairs gave this clinic 4 out of 5 stars. And when they were asked about it, they defended that rating. 4 out of 5 stars. That's excellent care in their book.
Yes, it's terrible that it was even rated and defended by the Veterans Administration leadership for 4 out of 5 stars. I have a friend that's a disabled veteran in the state of New Hampshire that tried to use the so called choice program for 2 years. And this spring, he sent me a note, said he finally gave up and that he would just pay for his own health care until the Veterans Administration and the government got its act together enough to where they could do the right health care by all the veterans, regardless of where they're at.
Right, which is sad because of all the people in our country who we have an obligation to take care of. Our veterans should be first in line. Very quickly, and I know that this is, I guess, a highly fraught topic here, but in your opinion, as a veteran yourself who's experienced the VA system, reading stories like this, having friends who've experienced the bureaucracy, is it time for us to privatize the system?
It's time for us to put veterans in touch with the healthcare, whether that's a private doctor 5 minutes from my house or a government doctor is really beside the point. We need to make sure that a veteran like me can get to the doctor that they want to. And in my case, I have a clinic 5 minutes from my house where my primary care physician is, and my private insurance that I pay for is paying for that primary care physician. Well, I ought to be able to do that using my veterans benefits too. And it's ridiculous that we cannot do that. And it won't cost the government any more money. It'll actually probably be cheaper because it'll input competition in the private sector and the medical sector.
Right, you're absolutely right. That's why we need people like you in our government and not the bureaucrats who are out of touch with what the American people really need. Colonel, thanks so much for coming on the show. And as always, thank you for your service to our nation.